What up, y'all? Terry Warfield. Yo, I hope you're having a good day so far. If this is your first time here, a big fat welcome to you. And if you're part of the fam, you part of the squad, you came back, welcome back. I gotta send a big shout out to all of y'all real quick. We just crossed 13K on the channel, man. 13K, thank y'all so much. It's time to go get that new YouTuber Tesla that everybody got. I gotta go get one now, it's only right. Being for real, thank y'all so much. But today, we gotta talk about the Sony A7C. This camera right here. Sony did send me this camera to test out. This is not a sponsored video or anything like that. In fact, we're not even gonna do the typical review that I'm usually doing. I wanna switch it up. I'm gonna give you my impressions, my initial impressions, because I've been using it about a week. But what I'm gonna do, instead of doing this long drawn out review, I'm gonna field y'all questions. So on my YouTube community tab, my Twitter post, and Instagram, I put a picture up with a Sony A7C, basically just asking what questions do y'all have. So we're gonna go through a bunch of those questions. Surprisingly, there was like 40 questions total, so I'm gonna just pick through them. Let me give you my initial impressions so far. This thing is 1,800 bucks by itself with this kit lens, which is the 28-60 f4 to f5.6. It's like close to $2,100. I thought this kit lens was gonna be junk, but surprisingly it's not. It's actually really well built and the picture quality is amazing. My only gripe is it's f4 to f5.6. Who wants that? Not me. Some people may, but I do appreciate the small form factor. I didn't really feel like there was a pocket for the Sony A7C, right? Why? Why do we need this camera? Who asked for it? That's how I felt before I got this thing into review. But now after using it for a few days, my mind has changed. So basically, this thing is a baby A7 III, or I should say a A7 III stuffed into a A6000 body. I do think that this camera does appeal to people who maybe already have bigger bodies, right? Maybe they have an A7 III or A7S III, and they want a travel camera or a vlogging camera that's much smaller that can still give them that A7 III level quality. Because even though the A7 III is what, 3 years old now, it can still pump out amazing quality photos, amazing quality 4K, and pretty good 1080p slow motion as long as you're okay with sharpening it a little bit in post. This can be a pretty good travel camera for a lot of people, and maybe for people who do just want a small camera. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on photo quality or video quality because it is literally the same codec stack from the Sony A7 III, which, by the way, this is still one of my favorite cameras. There's a video right up there that after this video, you must go watch why I love the A7 III so much. Here's a comparison between my trusty old A6300 and the Sony A7C. As you can see, it's not a whole lot bigger. I don't know, man. To me, it's not like the A7 III is a big camera. So the size advantage to me is not that big of a deal. I love the doors on the side, how the ports have these strong, sturdy doors. On my A7 III, the doors just kind of flap around. On this one, they are nice and defined. I love how it has a flip out screen like the Sony A7S III. However, it is not the A7S III's menu system. It is still the plain Jane A7 III menu. The touchscreen, you can't interact with it like you can with the A7S III. You can only touch the focus. The EVF, in my opinion, I can't see myself using this EVF at all. And the rear display is pretty much the same one as from the A7 III. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. It's got the same layout pretty much as the A6000 series camera. What I do appreciate is it has a Z battery. So this camera is rated for the best battery life basically out of any Sony camera that we have right now. It is a little bit thicker. You know I like them thick because it does have to house that bigger battery, but it feels super premium. It looks premium. I can't really complain about it too much because it is meant to be a smaller full frame camera. Obviously the biggest difference is that full frame inside. I mean, me not comparing it directly with the A7 III, which we'll talk about in 1 second, I think it's a pretty good kit, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I would buy one personally, but I could see how some people might spring for this. Now, before we get to the questions, what are the main differences between this and the trusty old A7 III? Well, there's a few differences, right? And there's trade-offs. This one, you do have the improved autofocus system. So this one does have face detect. This one does have object tracking. And it also has eye detect and video, which the A7 III does not have. This has Sony's last generation autofocus system, which is still good, but it's not as good as the new improved AF system from basically all of Sony's current lineup of cameras. So that's something to consider. Also, A7C does not have a record limit. A7 III has a 30-minute record limit. The A7C only has one card slot, so if you're a professional or you use your camera in a professional manner, that's some stuff you got to think about, whereas the A7 III has two card slots. And there's two other things that are a big deal to me. Number one, max shutter speed. On the Sony A7 III, the max shutter speed is 1/8,000th of a second. On the A7C, the shutter speed max is 1/4,000th of a second. And the second thing, which is the appeal of the bigger bodies, is just more buttons, man. You got custom buttons everywhere. You got dials everywhere. On the A7C, you don't have a lot of that. Like, there's no front dial that you would usually use like your aperture shutter combo with. There is no front dial. So on the back of the camera, a lot of times you got to go into the menu to find something or set it to your function menu. So there's just not a lot when it comes to customizing like you get with the A7 III. However, there are benefits. You get the flip out screen, you get the smaller body, you get better battery life, improved autofocus, and I haven't done a super scientific color side-by-side test, but what I did notice is with the A7C, the skin tones seem a little bit more pleasing. I don't know what it is. The image out of this looks slightly better. It's the same 1080p though, same slow-mo, everything is the same except for maybe that slight boosted color sign. So those are my initial impressions of the A7C. It is a dope little camera, and I feel like they have created a lane where a lane didn't necessarily exist, which is where a lot of great product ideas come from. They create product lanes where people otherwise didn't think that they needed it until it got created. Even though I would like to see better codecs, a way better EVF in here, y'all still made a dope little camera, so congratulations. Now, before we get into the questions, I gotta ask real quick, make sure you are subscribed, and also if you're liking this content so far, drop a like on this bad boy, and y'all can get wild in the comments. I don't even care, just go down there and go crazy. I'm gonna be in the comments with y'all, kicking it and hanging out. Let's get into some of these questions. Let's start with YouTube community first. Sonny says, coming from an A6400, worth the upgrade or continue to wait for a A7 IV? All right, I believe that the best cameras are the ones you can get a hold of. What's gonna happen is when you get the A7 IV, then when the A7 V gets announced, then you're gonna be like, oh my God, I gotta get rid of my A7 IV. So I believe you should pick from the cameras we have access to right now. With that being said, the A6400 is a great little camera, very capable camera. I really think you gotta think about your upgrade path. Do you wanna go full frame? That's the big question. Because if you wanna go full frame, then this is a consideration. But I also wanna remind you that the A7 III can be had for about the same price. And even though this does have its advantages, I think the A7 III still offers more advantages, even though it does have some disadvantages compared to the A7C. With the A6400, the main benefit of going full frame is better low light performance, better depth of field, and lenses, which can be a pro or a con. You got to remember, with the A6000 series cameras, they have a crop sensor. And usually crop glass is a lot cheaper and a lot smaller than full frame glass. Sony is developing full frame smaller lenses for the Sony A7C line. This is one of them. However, those things are gonna be expensive. You mark my words. Short answer, will it be an upgrade for you? Absolutely. Way better battery life, full frame, better quality, stuff like that. I would say either shoot for the A7C or an A7 III. All right, next question comes from Kenny Williams. I really want to sell my A7 III and cop this bad boy. Tell me why I shouldn't. Listen, man. If you didn't have an A7 III already, I would feel like this is a compelling argument. But because you already have an A7 III, would I sell mine for A7C? Absolutely not, for a few reasons. Number one, and I mentioned some of these at the beginning of this video, just the amount of control, the amount of dials, customizable buttons on the A7 III, it is so much better than having to dig through menus to get the stuff you want. Sure, you can customize your function button, etc., but the A7 III is gonna give you more control. The second thing is dual card slots. Maybe you don't use that right now, but imagine if you got in a situation where you did decide that you wanted to take a paid gig, right? Well, on the A7 III, you have dual card slots for redundancy, whereas this one, you don't. Also, I don't know if you're into photography or not, but again, that difference between 1/4000th of a second and 1/8000th of a second, that's a big deal. Now, what would you get with the A7C? Obviously, a smaller body. You're getting that flip out screen. You also get no record time and improved autofocus. So I don't know, man, those advantages that the A7C offers to me don't overthrow the advantages that the A7 III has to offer. So if I were you, I would keep my A7 III. All right, McWaffles PK, which that's a wild name. How ridiculous does this thing feel with something like a Sigma 24-70? How obnoxious is the EVF and how uncomfortable is the grip compared to the Sony A6000 series cameras? You freaking cheated, bro. You got like 17 questions in this one question, but we gonna let it ride because they are great freaking questions. So the first question is, how ridiculous does this look with something like a 24-70? Let me just show you a video clip real quick of a Sony A7C with a 24-70 millimeter G Master loaded on the front of it. And yes, it looks absolutely ridiculous and it's totally front heavy. So again, this is made for smaller lenses. It's not really made for those huge lenses, even though you can mount them on there, but it looks absolutely ridiculous. But does it work? Sure it works. I don't know if you'll be able to load it on a gimbal or if you really want to carry around that heavy of a lens on a smaller camera like this, but short answer, you can do it. As far as the EVF is concerned, I do not like the EVF on here. It is painful if you ask me. And I'm not the only one that's complained about the EVF on this camera. I get it, it's gotta be small. They probably needed to cut costs somewhere, but I don't think people would have been mad to hike the price up another $150 to put a better EVF into this thing. It's to a point where on this camera, I don't even use the EVF. I just use the screen on the back. And to answer your third question, like I said, I got an A6300 right here. The grip is deeper, I will say that, but that's because this one has a Z battery, whereas this one has those punk Sony batteries that they ain't worth a damn. To answer your question, the grip is deeper on the A7C because it has to house that bigger battery. I don't find the grip on either too particularly comfortable because they are just small grips, but I guess comparatively speaking, it is better than the A6000 series cameras, with exception to the 6600 because the 6600 also has that deeper grip because of the Z battery. All right, one more question before we jump over to Twitter and Instagram. DavTech says, hey, probably super simple, but I'm wondering how is the IBIS compared to the A6600? I'm looking into getting one for the channel in a few months, and I know the A66 IBIS isn't the greatest thing on earth. Thank you for your time. Listen, thank you for your time, number one, and let's just keep it real. I got 4 Sony cameras right here. You getting max 5 stops of stabilization. Now, full transparency, I don't have an A6600 here to test, but I've tested basically all Sony's cameras, and I know what the IBIS systems are like. The difference between the 6600 and the A7C is this one records gyroscopic data. So what that means, there's my dog, sorry about that. You can take the footage out of this, put it into Catalyst Browse. Catalyst Browse can super stabilize your footage where you can't do that with the A6600. So I'm gonna give the advantage to the A7C because it records gyroscopic data. I'm so sorry about my dog right now. It's 12 o'clock midnight and this guy is up here going to town, probably playing with the kids who are still up for some reason. But anyways, great question. You know what, 2 other questions real quick from YouTube. Kevin Kid, what up kid? Says on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate it? Listen, I'm gonna be honest. I don't rate cameras because there is no perfect camera. It's all about finding the camera that has the feature set that fits best for you and your price range. So I don't rate cameras because I feel like they are all different. They all have their pros and cons. It's just picking your poison. All right, last question from YouTube. This time I'm serious. Jeremy C, how does one decide if A7C or A7S III is a better fit? Honestly, I don't even think you can compare these 2 cameras because I got an A7S III right there that I'm filming with and an A7C right here, the loaner from Sony. They're marketed towards 2 totally different types of people. This is for people who want a smaller, full frame camera, who want A7 III level quality, but don't want to break the bank and they want something small. The A7S III is for prosumers, professionals who are serious about video work, but don't want to go full-on cinema camera. It's also $1,500 more. The A7S III has Sony's latest and greatest technology in a mirrorless camera, where this is essentially like 3-year-old tech with some upgrades packed in a smaller body. So I don't really think you can compare the 2 directly. I think they're 2 totally different classes of camera. All right, let's go to Instagram. And by the way, if we ain't friends on Instagram, it's your fault and you tripping, so make sure you add me on there. first question from Senor Bud. Does it fit in the pockets of your skinny jeans? Man, have you seen my legs? I mean, that's probably a weird question, but I lift a lot of weights, yo. So my legs is too big to fit in most skinny jeans. With that being said, even though it is a small camera, I can't really see something like this fitting into a pair of skinny jeans. Maybe something like the RX100 or the Sony ZV-1. Those could. This bad boy, if you try to get this into your skinny jeans and you get it in there, you might not get this camera out. You might have to cut your pants off. All right, we got a great question from Pierce Webb. What up, Tuck? This is awesome. I'm debating getting this camera, but I think I need to commit to an upload schedule before dropping this much money. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, say, the A6600 and this, and is it worth spending the extra money for? Great freaking question. The A6600 is a fantastic camera, but it is a crop sensor camera. Let's talk about the pros and cons of crop sensor real quick. Number one, you do get the extra reach because of the crop factor. Some might look at that like a disadvantage. Some may look at that like an advantage. However, all things being considered, full frame is typically better when it comes to low light, image quality, and dynamic range. That's not to say that crop sensor cameras can't produce fantastic stuff, because under the right conditions, they rival full frame, right? But they do have those disadvantages where they typically are worse with low light and also typically worse when it comes to dynamic range. Now, where's the advantage with the A6600? It's a fantastic camera, small body, but it's got APS-C lenses, which we talked about earlier in this video. APS-C lenses typically are cheaper and a lot smaller. If you go full frame, even though Sony is developing new smaller lenses for the A7C line that will be full frame, they ain't out yet. So right now that means you would have to get full frame glass or use this camera in crop mode, which is essentially just using an A6600. So I would say if you can afford to spend the extra $400 and you don't mind the cost of full frame glass, go with this all the way, because it's essentially an A6600 on steroids. I also think maybe right now, if you only got $1,400 to spend, it may be worth saving up a little bit more money, because I do think full frame offers a lot of great benefits over crop. However, if you can afford full frame lenses, or if those low light advantages wouldn't make a big deal to you, then maybe save that $400 and invest in a gimbal or a lens or something like that. I really think it depends on your upgrade path and what you intend to do in the future. So in a nutshell, can you go wrong with either? I don't think so. It's just really picking which one is gonna suit your upgrade path better and how much money you ultimately want to spend. I'm losing my voice, yo, from talking so dang on much. All right, last question from Instagram and then we'll hit Twitter. ShadyCool_24_23 said, let's get that comparison to the A7 III and the new Beast. Here's the thing. I'm not gonna waste my time comparing it directly with the A7 III because it's essentially an A7 III in a smaller body, minus a card slot, with a flip out screen, improved autofocus, and a few other small things that to me they're not really anything worth comparing them. I think if you just want the smaller camera, then get the smaller camera as long as you are okay with the trade-offs. But if not, I think the A7 III is still the better buy here, because it's not like the A7 III is a big camera, but everything else is basically the same on them. Now, as far as comparing this to the A7S III, I kind of talked about this 3 questions ago, I think. I don't really think you can compare the two. They're two totally different class of cameras. So will I be wasting my time, or not wasting my time, but will I be taking out any time to compare the A7C directly with the A7 III? Probably not, because the A7C kind of stands in its own lane. It's like nestled in its own little pocket, you know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna just leave it in that little pocket where it's supposed to be at. All right, now let's go to Twitter for a few more questions and then we'll wrap this up. First question, Tina Saraf, sorry if I did not say your name correctly. How is the real-time tracking the eye autofocus in video compared to the A7S III? Keep hustling, so excited to see your review. Yo, I appreciate those kind words. Great freaking question. The A7C does have Sony's newest autofocus system in it. So it does offer real-time tracking. You just push the AF on button and it tracks whatever in the frame you select. And eye autofocus does work in photo and video mode up to 4K 30. It just works. It's friggin' reliable. It works. It doesn't get in the way. Really not much more to talk about because it just friggin' works. All right, next question is from King Crate, my man Joe. What up, Joe? Is the 1080p better than the A7 III? Short answer, no. It's the exact same stack of resolutions, bit rates, everything is the same with the A7 III. So we all know the 1080p out of the A7 III is not that good, and it is not that good out of the A7C either. I think the only benefit to the A7C is the colors are slightly tweaked. I think the skin tones out of the A7C look better than the A7 III, not by a lot, but I do think they are a bit more accurate. Aside from that, it's the same thing. 4K up to 30 frames per second, 1080p up to 120 frames per second. Slow-mo, center profiles, S-Log profiles, and HLG profiles, same stuff. All right, ROM creations or ROM creations or ROM creations. I'm not really sure how to say it. Does this have sensor stabilization like the new iPhone Pro? I'm still learning about real cameras. So yeah, that's a great question actually. So cameras have had this for a while where what'll happen is there's a mechanism inside the camera that when you turn the camera on, it engages the sensor. And if you move left, the sensor shift will move the sensor right up. So in a nutshell, it's counteracting all your movements. The iPhone 12 Pro Max, I believe, will be the first cell phone. So it's not new to cameras, new to phones. Great freaking question. All right, last question from It's Override, Manraj Guman. Sorry if I mispronounced that. What settings do you use for product photography if you do that type of thing? And how do those vary from the A7 III settings, if at all? So this is gonna be pretty much a general question across the board. Product photography is its own niche. Typically you want macro glass, you need good lighting, and you use depth of field to your advantage. So you don't shoot products at f1.4 because, for example, if I shoot a camera at f1.4, the front of my lens is in focus and the rear of my camera is out of focus, which if you're showing off a product, you want the whole product in focus. So really for product photography, you need a lot of lighting. You need to have usually some type of box to put the product in and surround it with everything in one color. You want to use higher aperture values, so like f7.1, f8, and you can really do that with any camera. That's not specific to the A7C, the A7S III, the A7 III. None of these cameras I have on the table that is specific to. You can really do product photography with any camera as long as you have those pieces in place. So anyways, man, I am sick of talking. I know there's a lot of questions I might have missed. I can't get to all of them unless y'all want a freaking hour-long video, but I hope some of these answers helped you when it comes to Sony's new A7C. I know this thing is still on pre-order or back order in a lot of places. The price will be $1,800. I'll update the link to this video once it's available on Amazon, Sony, or through my friends over at Pixel Connection, which I'll make sure their page is linked also. But anyways, like I said, I hope y'all found value in this video, and that's it. So till next time, I am out. Peace and chicken grease. Terry Warfield. Peace.